Welcome, Chris Hot Rod Long. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing good. I'm doing very good. Busy day, staying busy, working with some musicians that I enjoy, and that's always makes life better.
Awesome. Another day on the hustle, right?
That's what I'm doing. I'm hustling for sure.
A hustle day is a good day for sure, for sure. So, yeah, it's such an honor and privilege to have you on the show. I've got so much that I want to ask you and tap into your brilliance. But let's start with a little bit of the backstory as far as music goes. To your earliest memories, what were some of the first memories you have of music artists you remember listening to growing up that it was beyond just, hey, this is good. It was like, this is incredible. And now you kind of feel like it pushed you in a different direction. It changed your life.
Well, I moved to California to get away from where I grew up. I always loved music since I was a little kid. The housekeeper, when my mom and dad went to work, they were teachers, used to play the old R&B station in the 70s where I grew up. And I knew more about Marvin Gaye than any 4-year-old in the state of Virginia. So it was something that I really got into early, and I survived the disco era. But I moved here just to get away and got in the music business on a dare. But when I was in high school, I was a big metal guy. Ozzy was big, Deep Purple was big, Black Sabbath was big. And then I went off to college for a very abbreviated attempt at a college career. And I noticed that the prettier girls went down into the TV room in the dormitory on Sunday night when 120 Minutes was on.
Hmm.
And I kind of wanted to hang out. And they had all seen me down in the room watching the Headbangers Ball on Saturday and kind of turned their nose up at me. And I didn't really care. I just hung out for the music, and I really started to really like lots of stuff then. That's really when I started liking the Smiths and Susie and the Banshees and bands that I still enjoy all these years later. But like I said, wasn't a very long college career. I met a friend and his wife who moved to Hollywood with his band, and she got a job at a temp agency and said,
Hmm.
if you get here on a Thursday, you can start work on a Monday. And I hated college. I didn't like doing homework. I didn't like doing any of had early classes for some reason and, slept through all of them. And so I sold all my stuff. I had an auction in the dorm, sold my TV, a lot of my clothes. I kept like 25 CDs and 25 cassettes back in the cassette day, and loaded up the car and moved to Beverly, as they say, in January of 1989. So it's coming up on, what is that, 36 years. And
Man.
when I got here, my friend said, you should write a review of my show for this magazine. Completely self-serving. Totally wanted me to write a review for his band. And I said, well, I just dropped out of college. Why would I want to do that? I don't want any homework. I don't want to have to sit down and write something. I'm good at it, but I don't really want to do it. And he said, because you can do it all the time. This magazine will print anything, and it's a great way to meet girls and see free music. And I went, oh, okay, I'm in. And the only felony I ever committed was I took his birth certificate to the DMV to get an ID, not so I could go drinking, but so that I was only 19, so that I could get into clubs to write concert reviews.
That's a
And
worthy cause, I
yeah, they
think.
didn't have your photo attached to your driver's license in the early computer days. It was
Hmm.
just your information. And he had gone to North Hollywood, and I went to Compton, which is Compton.
Which
And
is Compton.
yeah, a lady said, excuse me, Mr., and I'm not going to mention the last name, Mr. Jones, we got a problem. And I said, what's the matter? And she said, 8 months ago in North Hollywood, you had brown hair and brown eyes. And now you
Mm.
sit here with blonde hair and blue eyes. Just off the top of my head, I said, well, you know how the sun turns white people's skin darker? It makes our hair and our eyes lighter. And she went,
Mm.
I ain't never heard that. Your ID will be in the mail in 3 weeks. And I was like, oh, shit. Okay. So that's what got my career as a music journalist started.
Wow.
Scamming the lady at the DMV in Compton for a legit ID.
You're a
But
daring man. I mean,
yeah,
first thing is throwing all your stuff in the trunk of your car, driving to Cali, and no looking back with 25 CDs and 25 cassettes to your name, and then uh getting the idea. I mean, man.
yeah. And before I got that ID, I had IDs from blood plasma center donations where you'd sell your blood plasma to makeup companies. I had an ID that I found on the street that looked nothing like me that said I was twice my age. And I had to think of some pen name. And I said, oh God, this is a long story. What am I going to do? And that friend whose birth certificate I borrowed said, oh man, why don't you call yourself Hotrod Long? So you'll be long, comma, Hotrod on all the guest list. And that's how I came up with the nickname Hot Rod Long.
That sounds like something straight out of Beavis and Butthead.
That's why I did the laugh. That's why I did the laugh. And I started going out to shows. And after about 6 months, the magazine came out every 2 weeks. That was, 12 or 15 issues of the magazine where I had a lot. I would go out all the time and write show reviews. And people started coming up to me and like, oh, you're that guy Hot Rod. And one guy one time said, remember that time we did mushrooms at the Scorpion show at the Forum? And I was thinking, I was in the 8th grade, 3,000 miles away. Well, yeah, I remember that. How you doing, man? Long time no see. And when people would come up, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I branded myself. And I was that guy Hot Rod.
Yeah.
And after the first year of writing, I realized I made $50. I averaged 5 hours a night sleep, and I had to get up and go drive an hour each way to and from a telemarketing job I hated. And I said, something's got to change. Well, those people that promote the concerts make all the money. And I know the people at those clubs, and I got the fake ID situation covered. I'm only 20 at the time. Why don't I start promoting concerts? And I kept writing for the magazines, and I started promoting concerts, and that's what really got me rolling.
Man, so you're kind of like an entrepreneur at the same time, breaking into the industry, but being an entrepreneur at the same time.
Well, I was the world's worst entrepreneur because everybody usually got paid but me. I'd make sure the bands got taken care of so they'd come back at a time when there were a lot of concert promoters who would fuck them. And, I mean, I made money, but nowhere near as much. I gave away way more than I should have. But it wasn't like I was some dude with a big fat pocket of cash and a Beamer. Hell, I didn't have a car for almost like 3.5 years. Man. So it was just, I definitely put some miles on my feet going to and from all the clubs in Hollywood.
Do you think, because I think that's interesting, because it seems to me that when you were doing the club promoting, you were more concerned about gaining the artist's trust than you were. I mean, I'm sure you wanted to make money. I'm not, discounting that, but you wanted to get in with them and build relationships.
Well, I did, but at the same time, I also knew that if I did a good job with the promoting, what my ultimate goal was I wanted one of those jobs at the record labels where all the people came in and always had money and were always buying everybody everything and had a company credit card, and their whole job, they get up every day and go deal with music and go make records and find bands. And that was my ultimate goal, was to get an A&R job out of doing this. And I did 2 months after I turned 21, and it pissed a lot of people off, but it made me happy. Oh, everyone else in town who thought they were more qualified for the job than I was.
Oh yeah.
And most of them, yeah. Most of them were interviewed by the company, and they would bring these bands in and say, oh, you should hear this band, or I would sign this band, or I would sign that band. And the guy that hired me and I are still in touch. And he said the answer to every single band every person ever brought into those interviews was, we already heard about them from you. So that's why we hired you.
Wow.
So here's an office. Keep promoting. Keep writing for magazines. Just tell us about anything good first. And
so
start trying to get your shit in some magazines in other cities. So people from there will send you demos too.
So they saw you as a source from the top, because they're like, this guy is cemented into the scene. So he's this is not theoretical. He's living and breathing it. He actually knows what's happening. So let's just, let's get him in here. He's tapped it, and they wanted you to keep on. It's not like they were saying, okay, give that up, and now you're going to sit at this desk all day.
No, that was like part of the deal, was that I kept on doing that. That was like, well, what do you want me to do? Like exactly what you're doing, and then come in and have an office and behave. And that was really about it.
Hey, this is Jeff. I'd like to take a second and tell you about this channel. I really encourage you to hit the subscribe button. This really helps out the channel, helps it grow. And also, if you can like and put your comments for this video, that'd so much be appreciated. This really helps me to continue to book amazing artists that hopefully inspire you and continue to grow this channel. Thank you.
That's brilliant. What record label?
That was a label called Chameleon. And one of the bands that I found very early, I never would have found if I had had a car. It's a really weird story. I was walking back through Hollywood from one club back to my apartment and walked past another club to see what was going on. And there were these 4 really dirty desert rat kids sitting out on the sidewalk with really pissed off looks on their face. I'm like, what's wrong with you? They're like, these assholes won't let us in the club until our band plays because we're not 21. I'm like, from the looks of you, you're not 18 either. They said, we're not, asshole. What do you care?
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, a wise ass, huh? I think I'm going to stick around and write a bad review. Okay, I don't usually write bad reviews, but these 4 motherfuckers deserve it.
Yeah.
And it was Caius, and that's Queens of the Stone Age.
Man, oh man, oh man. What an introduction.
Yeah, it was like they went on stage and it was like life-changing. Not just in actuality, but at that moment, it was just like, this is the best shit I have ever seen in my life.
Oh, do tell. Oh, do tell. I mean, because you, at that point, I'm sure you saw plenty of bands. So what was it about Caius when they hit the stage? You were like, wait a minute.
It was like you're standing in a field and all of a sudden the wind comes by and picks you up and throws you head over heels and drops you on the ground about 100 yards away. And it was just impossible to miss. It was just like, these guys are doing something I've never heard before, and boy, do they do it good. And, the singer for Caius wasn't Josh. It was a different guy, and he had a lot to do with it, John Garcia. Okay. And Josh and Nick and Brant, the original lineup, were just like, they were from Palm Desert. They didn't come to the city much. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff in town. We're talking into the glam rock before the beginning of grunge scenes. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of shit going on that was, they were nothing like any of it. And wow. I went over to them and said, hey, I'm going to write a review for this magazine. They went, yeah, well, here's our manager's phone number. Call her and tell her about it. And they just were still really standoffish. And I wrote a bunch of reviews and I started promoting them and doing showcases. And they got signed by the label, who then hired me and said, next time you just got to tell us first when you find somebody. Yeah. And okay.
Because at that time, that's a big deal. And in the big label signing days, it got competitive between the labels, right? Mm-hmm. They wanted first in on anything hot because they don't want to go into a bidding war, pay much more money than they really, want to. They don't want to lose something that could be hot.
Yeah. And that's what happened. Was I created such a buzz around that band. Now, when I say it's all about the songs. It's always about the band. And anyone who sits here and says that they made a band famous who wasn't already good enough to be famous is a disingenuous prick. And I've seen a lot of people in podcasts just rewrite history. And I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna do that. But it's, they were that good, and I would put them on shows, and every label in town would show up, and Rick Rubin was chasing them, and a whole bunch of other people were chasing them, and this label got to them first, and they liked the fact that they were the first label that paid them any attention.
This is Camellia.
Yeah, Chameleon. Yeah, like the little lizard. Yeah. Wow.
So I mean, Rick Rubin was interested too.
Oh yeah. Everybody was coming to the shows. I mean, everybody was, I wrote for 2 magazines in town, and that's when everybody would stop at the record store and pick up the magazines to see what was going on. This was back in the olden days, long before there was an internet, long back when you had to seek out a magazine to find out what was going on. And you would look at all the club listings and go circle the one that you're going to for each night. Yeah. And, it was, the LA Weekly was the biggest one. And I didn't write for them, but the other ones, the street fanzines, are where you found out about stuff before it got in the LA Weekly.
Man,
Yeah.
from the ground up. That's so cool. I mean, now tell me, like, 'cause I want to know more about Caius, but also, too, what was the key at that time to promoting these shows, getting a packed house, getting a buzz? What was the secret?
Well, I think 35 years is long enough to not worry about hurting anyone's feelings. But you would invite two bands that weren't necessarily that great, that had a huge following that would come see them wherever they played, and put a really good band on in the middle and let them play for those two bands' crowds, who then become their crowd. And some of them, others would go, "Oh, this is horrible," and they would like go stand outside and smoke or whatever, walk around the block or whatever, because they didn't like it. But
Mhm.
if the size rooms I was promoting were like 200 to 300, 400 capacity, I mean the whiskey's only 440,
Yeah.
so they're not big rooms. So just putting a couple of bands that had a crowd that would draw people that paid, and you would cover 3 time slots with two bands with a big draw, and let Caius. They were from the desert. They were in high school. Nobody was
Mhm.
like coming from Palm Desert. It's shit. It's 3 hour drive one way,
Right.
on a school night. I'm
Yeah.
surprised their parents let them do it, but they did.
Man.
Or they didn't know
That's
about it. They were sneaking out, one or the other. I never did get the answer to that question, but it worked out well for them.
That's brilliant. I've heard of that strategy. I think it's one of Gene Simmons' books, but he said exactly that they had a record label showcase and nobody really knew who they were. So they would pick a couple bands that were really hot, try to play in the middle and act like that was their scene, and that really boosted them.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was one that had Simmons Records at the time, and he was at shows all the time too. He and I
Oh,
were on a first name
man.
basis.
Man, that must
Hey, Hotrod,
That must have been an exciting time.
you know who's playing tonight. That's why you're here. And and I'd also make people like him pay. Well, I'm Gene Simmons. And I'm like, then you sure as hell can afford $10 to get in. Fork it over.
exactly.
Yeah. And my poor friends who worked at the grocery store bagging groceries, if I had room for 10 free people, that's who I'd let in. I'm not gonna, Rick Rubin,
Absolutely.
come in for free. No, I let Freddy Krueger into a couple of shows for free. The actor, Robert Englund, he was, "Oh, dude, come on in, man.
Yeah.
You're great." Scared the hell out of me. But
Oh, yeah.
most of the, people would drive up to the front door and get out of a Maserati and go, "I'm on the guest list." I'm like, "No, you're not." Well, I'm on the list. I'm like, and sometimes I would, if they had an attitude, I'd say it's only $20, and I'd raise the price. And then
Yeah.
I'd say, "Okay, well, I'll let you in for 10." And they go, "Okay." And they felt like they got a deal, and I've just got my $10 either way. So it's, and half of that or more went to the band.
Man,
I had to buy the ads and pay the sound guy and stuff. So it was,
it's really cool.
yeah.
So once you got to Chameleon, I mean, where did it go from there as far as, I mean, you got Caius, they signed Caius. What happened after that?
Well, Caius, it's a perfect example of not choosing a difficult to say or pronounce band name, because Caius you couldn't tell if it was Kias or Kiss or Kia or what, it was a lot of confusion about the name, but they did really good on the KNAC station, the heavy metal station. And they did
Mhm.
really good in, believe it or not, Australia and Germany is where they were the biggest in these early days. And
Yeah.
the record, the record label had flaws, and some of the flaws were in the marketing and promotion, and they didn't get as, they put 4 records out and then broke up and became Queens of the Stone Age. 3 of them were with Chameleon. The 4th was on Elektra, was our parent company. And there was a big fight between a billionaire and $100 million and the whole roster got torn apart. We all got thrown out like garbage 2 days before Thanksgiving one year in a pissing contest. But he kept Caius and one other, Dramarama, and dropped all the rest of the bands. The guy at Elektra.
You said Dramarama?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember them.
Yeah. So Caius, and Dramarama's coming back. I saw John not that long ago. But so Caius was on the band, and of course the guy that hired me signed him, so I couldn't take credit for signing him. And I was working with this local band that was really good. They had a really charismatic frontman, and they were just starting to get really, really, really big when Rage Against the Machine came out. And Rage Against the Machine sucked the wind out of every other band in town sales. And I told Scott, like, dude, just relax. You're going to sell more records than they are.
Right.
And it was Stone Temple Pilots. And that was
What?
the first band I tried to sign at Chameleon was Stone Temple Pilots. I'll send you the pass letter that I've kept all these years. Not saying I'm resentful that my boss passed on the letter, passed on the band, and it was a 4-song demo with 3 songs on their first album on it.
Man, oh man, oh man. So do tell. So you saw STP before all the hype and the fame. I mean, tell me, when you first saw them, I mean, what was going through your mind? What were you thinking? What was...
Well, they were called Mighty Joe Young at the time.
Okay.
Scott, I'll decide if I'm going to tell this story later, but what I saw was a really good band who sounded too much like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And
Really?
this was 89, 90, you know.
Okay.
This is before grunge. This is before everything. And when I first started being, you know, a fan of theirs, they sounded like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And then as grunge started to break, they totally changed their sound and became the Stone Temple Pilots that you're aware of from their first record. But I got pictures of them with little pork pie hats and pants up to their, you know, like capri pants on and shit. Oh yeah, they were doing the whole funk thing, you know, way hard.
How did they sound as like a funky Chili Peppers kind of thing?
They were really good. If, you know, but you had to like that style of music. And eventually the Red Hot Chili Peppers got so big with that record, the first one on Warner Brothers after they got dropped by EMI, which was the Under the Bridge and I think it's Californication. I'm not a Chili Peppers fan, and I'm proud to say that. But it was they Stone Temple Pilots or Mighty Joe Young, who is a blues musician who wouldn't let them use his name. That's why they had to change their name. And they were really, really, really good. And Scott, you could tell I could tell, which I guess I'm like the, you know, artist whisperer or something. I don't know. I could tell like, man, this guy's really good. He's got
What is it about him?
It was his you could just tell by looking at him that he was incredibly talented. You could tell by watching him he was incredibly talented, and there was no one that wanted it more. He's like the sickly competitive guy that goes to the family reunion and brags about beating his 5-year-old nephew in a free throw shooting contest. That's the way he was when it came to how competitive he was. And the DeLeo brothers were really good. And the drummer, Eric, I forget his last name, they all were really good. And that's a Stone Temple Pilots platinum right there from the first record. So I've got several of those from them. But they just were really good. And I got a call from Ice-T one day, who I was like, sure, you're Ice-T. I saw you on MTV with one of those fancy new cell phones, Ice-T. Why don't you drive by this address and call me on your cell phone? And sure enough, 15 minutes later, he was downstairs honking at me. You believe me now, motherfucker? And when I used to promote my shows, I used to call record labels and managers. And the guy that answered the phone at Ice-T's manager's office is Steve Stewart. And he's the guy that became Stone Temple Pilots manager because I kept inviting him to the shows. And he saw what I saw, which is, you know, he saw enough in them to leave a cushy job working for George, Ice's manager, who's still Ice's manager all these years later, and go out on his own and start his own management company to manage Stone Temple Pilots.
Man, isn't that something?
I think he said, you know, I don't want George getting a piece of this, so I better leave the office and go do my own thing. I don't know what the deal was, but he just all of a sudden one day gave me a new phone number and I started calling him there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, I agree with you. Now, I saw Scott perform later, mid-90s, but I can tell you this, and I tell everybody to this day, that has to be in one of the top 5 concerts I've ever seen. And not only that, particularly with Scott, Stone Temple Pilots, I've never seen someone mesmerize a crowd like that. I've seen a lot of popular shows, you know, and the crowd is into it and they're feeling it. But this was something different. And the one thing that really caught me was that he was definitely in his own element, and to me, it came off like, I don't care, but I'm giving you 110%. But he was definitely in his own lane. But not only that, the audience sang every single lyric to every single song of the show. And it just blew. I mean, it got so loud to the point where sometimes you couldn't hear him because they wanted to give it back to him just as much as he was putting out. And it was like, the hair on my arms went up. I've never seen anything like it. And I don't think I've seen anything since then.
Imagine that and all the clubs back then are gone now. There's something else. But imagine that in a small place like the Whiskey. And with 800 people crammed in a room for 400, and not saying I ever broke any fire laws, but him doing that in that kind of a crowd when it was an $8 ticket or a $10 ticket with a bunch of people that didn't pay big money. They were just there, and he hadn't made it yet, so he had the extra energy and the extra drive. And here's a funny Scott story, and this kind of sums up his personality. Is I got a call one day, and this is not something that is going to come as a surprise to a lot of people. So that's why I'm telling the story. Is my friend called up and said, guess who my roommate in rehab is? And I said, who? He said, Scott Weiland. He said, he knows you. Like, I've told you that for years, moron. And so I went over to visit one day and went to visit my friend, and Scott was there. And my friend kept saying really inappropriate things. Scott was trying to get better. He's like, Scott's going to help manage this band I manage, get famous, this, that, and the other thing. And the band was called Big Bang Babies. And I said, dude, I told my friend, like, man, just leave Scott alone, man. Just leave him alone. The guy's here, and we didn't get into, I think the judge had sent him. I think the judge told him, you got to go to rehab or something. He doesn't want to be here. He sure doesn't want to be here in your shit or your shitty band. I mean, they're nothing like, and he said, hang on, Hot Rod. Hang on. I'm going to make Big Bang Babies very famous. And I said, well, gee, Scott, you don't really have to. I mean, they're not really all that good. He said, you watch and see.
Okay.
What was the first song on the next record after his trip in rehab?
Big Bang Baby.
Absolutely
it's a gas,
right.
gas.
Absolutely right. That's exactly how Scott was. He would get inspiration from different things. There's rumors that Stone Temple Pilots was Stone Gossard, who was in Temple of the Dog with some of the other guys from Mother Love Bone, and they kind of like came up with the name to like riff on them. I never got the confirmation on that, but Scott just looked at me, serious as could be, and just said, don't worry, I'm going to make them famous. And I still, when I talk to that guy who managed that band, which isn't very often, will laugh at him and go, remember, shut up. And that's all he'll say. Shut up. I don't want to hear that shit. Because that band never went anywhere. That band never went anywhere. But their name did.
Their name sure did. That was a great song.
Yeah.
And album.
So you presented STP to your label and they passed. Do tell that story. Sure you were disappointed at the time.
Oh, I was very disappointed, but the guy that hired me was best friends with the billionaire that owned the label. And they're like, you're the best guy. We've never, like I said earlier, we've never heard of a band that didn't suck that we didn't hear from you. The guy that ran the label, while those two guys were off in a band that was on the label on tour, was very resentful that he didn't get to hire someone for my job. So every time I tried to get a band signed, he would shit on it. And if Daniel and Dave were out of town, he could shit away and there were no repercussions. And that's exactly what happened, is he didn't like the fact that he didn't get to, here's a guy who signed a band that was horrible, that was managed by the son of the commissioner of Major League Baseball. Okay. So he could get free Yankee tickets where he'd sit behind home plate and you could see him on TV. So he saw that as me being hired as a lost opportunity for him to gain something And it
Bragging
was,
rights.
yeah, it was really, really, really awkward. It was really awkward. And I would always try to get in touch with Daniel and Dave, but sometimes, you got a boss says, what have you been up to? And you send off a memorandum to New York with a demo tape in it. And he sends back a pass letter, which, like I said, I still have. And it's dated and everything. So it's, shit happens.
Shit happens. Did you?
I'm sure you told.
I'm just glad they got signed, because the
yeah.
world wouldn't have heard all that music if
Yeah.
they. So
At the time, did you tell them, and what was their response?
oh, the band got signed and the record came out on Atlantic, and the guy that owned the label and my boss said, "Hey, how did you let this one slip by the goalie?" And I pulled out the letter and said I didn't. And within a month, that guy was gone.
Boom. Yeah, justice served, right?
It would not. I'm not saying I had anything to do with it, but I'm sure that didn't help. But he was gone, and he was overrunning a soundtrack label, which, when you're the head of a major label and your next job is a soundtrack label, it's like going from a rodeo cowboy to a rodeo clown. It's not a step up or even a lateral step. It's a big step down.
Big step down, 1 foot out the door.
Yeah.
Now, do you think STP at the time, they took that rejection? I mean, they obviously still succeeded, but I wonder what was going through their mind. They're probably thinking, hey, wait a minute, we think we have something special. What's up?
Well, I told them that just what I told you. Here's the reason why. When my boss and his band get back off a tour, let me see what I could do. But their manager, we weren't the only label that was interested at that point. And they signed with Atlantic, and everything worked out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
So as much as I would like it to have been me as a fan of music, you got to just say, hey, it couldn't have really gone much better for those guys other than the personal issues for 12 years. So all the people's lives that music changed, and as much as their families' lives changed because of that, for good or better, for better or worse, it's, you can't begrudge the fact that talented artists got their music out. I don't think that's cool. I've never been one to do that. Yeah, I would love to have, instead of thanks to Hot Rod Long, I'd rather have it be A&R by Hot Rod Long on the back of the record. And I'd rather still be getting those checks that what's his name is getting. But shit happens sometimes that you just got to chalk it up to shit happening.
You got a pulse. I definitely saw myself and saw others in many situations with the labels where, and I'm sure you saw this all the time, and a label is interested in a music artist, and they know that other labels are sniffing around. And what do? They tell the other label, hey, don't even think about touching this one, because if you don't, that cross collaboration we're doing with your other artist so-and-so, and they're supposed to work with our producer. Guess what? That ain't going to happen. So go away, like I told you.
That didn't happen. That didn't happen back then. That was before all this cross collaboration and one producer doing every rap record of the year and stuff like that. The label would just say, if you fuck with me, I'm going to fuck with you. And then the other label would fuck with them and run the price up. And then there'd be a band that in the future label 2 wanted to sign, and label 1 would run the price up on. And sometimes label 2 would jerk the chair out from under them and say, okay, you can have them, and run the other way. And then they're stuck with a band they didn't really want because they got into a pissing contest. I had a whole lot of friends get signed that way. And 6 weeks later, when the radio didn't embrace the record, you're dropped.
And you're shelved.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're dropped. Shelved is you're still on the label and they're jerking you around and telling you need to do stuff different. But when you're dropped, you're just no longer on the label.
But if you're dropped, but they might still have the rights to the music, right? You
can't just
the label. Oh yeah, the label would certainly have the rights to the first record. But if you get dropped, then you're damaged goods. No label wants to come along and give a band a second opportunity. Now, I'll tell them myself, when I was managing Crossfade, which we haven't gotten to yet, somebody at Columbia came up to me and said, are you looking to manage a pop artist? And I said, well, it depends on the situation. And they brought me this girl, this incredibly attractive, young, beautiful, beautiful girl, and said, well, she just lost her second record deal and everybody's talking about her and she's just really great. And she's working with this guy and he's like a great producer and a songwriter and everything. And I investigated the situation and they both wanted $1,000 a week from a manager to kind of cover their bills.
Mhm.
And I went, I'm not into spending 104 grand a year on feeding these kids. She's been dropped twice. And yeah, look at her, but she looked that good when she got dropped. And his
That's right.
songs are good, but I don't, I'm not putting anyone on salary. I'm managing a hard rock band. I'm not managing a big pop star. I don't have enough money to be forking out 2 grand a week on other people's rent. So I could
Mhm.
get up at 7 in the morning and work all day, and they can stay up until 7 in the morning and party all night. And it was Katy Perry and Pharrell Williams.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Really?
So I didn't have to tell that story and embarrass myself. But the way it was presented was not, here's Katy Perry. She never has had a record deal. She's got a job at the Barnes and Noble and just needs somebody to help shepherd her songs. It wasn't like that. It was, she had already had 2 managers and they got sick of giving her money. And same, with Pharrell Williams. I don't know exactly as many details as with him, but that's who the 2 people were. And I was just like, yeah, I'd love to manage these people, but 2 grand a week is mighty expensive with no guarantee on the return on the investment. And she's damaged. She's been dropped twice and hasn't had a single song out.
Yeah. Doesn't look promising at that point.
Yeah, it doesn't. It
Man.
didn't. And yeah, I don't go to bed at night on my threadbare sheets wishing, I wish I had the high thread count sheets. I should have invested that money. But, you live and you learn.
You live and you learn.
Live and you learn.
So after SDP and what have you, I mean, what was your next venture after that? Still working at the label or?
Well, I worked at the label. Yeah, sure. I didn't quit my job because that guy was a tool. I mean, they fired him and it made me look better.
Yeah.
So Rage Against the Machine here's what happened. Tom was in a band on Geffen Records called Lockup. And Geffen dropped him. Tom has an MBA from Harvard. And he knew business. And he said, I have this new band. I'm doing a showcase at SIR Rehearsal Studios. And my assistant, my girlfriend, myself, we're all inviting everybody in the record industry. And Tom was really very well liked and well respected as a guitar player. And he was in a band that also had a very heavy Red Hot Chili Peppers influence.
Oh yeah.
And well, it was the time, it was the late 80s. And they were the first signed band I ever wrote a review on. So I knew him from that. And they did a big showcase at SIR Studios, and everyone in town in the record business saw him the same night. No one discovered Rage Against the Machine. They presented themselves to the entire record business at once because Tom knew his shit.
Right.
And I was at that show. They gave away cassette tapes that was pretty much the album without being mixed. And they had like a little match taped to the front so you could strike the match and burn corporate America. That was the whole thing.
Even back then, man. Even back then they had that theme.
Well, yeah, but that was the first album. That was the theme of the whole first album. So
Yeah.
the songs had already been written. And I said to him, I'm like, look, like everyone else in the room, I'm going to try to get my bosses to sign you. But unlike anyone else in the room, why don't you let me do some shows with you and promote some shows with you? And he's like, sure, but you're not going to be the only one we work with. I said, nor did I expect that. I'll put you on anytime, any place you want to play. Let's do a show. And there was a place called the Shamrock that was a punk rock bar where old dudes would show up at like 6:15 in the morning and sit there and drink all day. The first time I went in the Shamrock, there was a pair of underwear with shit in it in the trash can in the bathroom. It was just like the nastiest fucking place.
Was this Hollywood?
Yeah, it's right across from the Goodwill on Hollywood Boulevard. It's now a bikini bar called Cheetahs.
Cheetahs, okay, yeah.
And it had a 99-person legal capacity. And I stopped letting people in at 4:15, I think it was, and the line was up the block. And on the same show, I had Stone Temple Pilots, Rage Against the Machine, a band called Sugartooth who got signed to Capitol, and a
Okay.
band from Northern California that never really materialized called the Smoke and Rhythm Prawns. But they were like Primus, like
Okay.
at the same time Primus was. So they were, kind of, Primus was still on Caroline Records. They hadn't gotten signed to Interscope yet.
Hmm.
And it was like my best moment as a promoter as far as just nailing the bands. And that night, the entire record industry showed up, and there were maybe 100 normal people that got in. And I called in extra security, and just there was a line over a quarter mile long outside that club after it was 4 times capacity. And I would
Man.
have gone to jail if the fire marshal had decided to stop by. He would have confiscated the money from the door, and I would have ended up in jail. And he'd have had all the money. And it was, that was the show when it was beyond obvious that both of those bands were going to get a record deal.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, and you used to be able to do things like that in Los Angeles, but you can't have nice things here anymore. And it's not because it's Los Angeles; it's just because how vastly different the times we live in. And
The industry's completely changed.
well, the reason why is before the internet, the best band in every city had to move to LA, New York, or Nashville to get any attention.
Hmm.
And the internet made everybody realize, well, we can stay home with our girlfriends and not have to go to LA and work at a Baskin Robbins for minimum wage or do backbreaking construction work and compete with the best bands from around the world. We can own the city. And by 1990, into 93, when I stopped working at that record label, there were bands getting signed out of Dallas, like Tripping Daisy. And there were bands that were getting signed out of other cities that didn't play that game. And it was also, it was before the internet, it was before the advent of EDM. And when club owners said, you mean I can pay one guy tripping balls on ecstasy and give him 12 beers and a 10-person guest list, and he'll spin music all night and everyone will dance and get thirsty and my bar tab will be 5 times higher than having
Yeah.
to deal with 50 arrogant pricks who all want 5 free beers and a 10-person guest list? Well, we're a dance club now.
Yeah.
And those two things really, really, really changed the face and the scope and the health of the LA rock scene. It died, and it
Man.
still never recovered.
So that must have been tough.
Oh, it sucked. It sucked. I had to get a marketing job for 5 years working at the LA Times, and I was doing stuff working with Taxi. That's when I found them and started working with them and trying to find bands to manage. I mean, been known to scalp a few concert tickets back in the day when you actually had to go to the machines and get the tickets.
Hmm.
And that's a whole nother story. We can do a whole episode on that if you want later on. But I still stayed real close to music, and all the money that I made I would spend at the record store or going to concerts. I mean,
Right.
it's one of the funniest things I remember from that phase of my life was I knew the guys in Korn. They used to be in a
Okay.
band called LAPD, which stood for large ass penises, dude. The record
Right.
label said it stood for love and peace, but the band said large ass penises, dude. And they saw me one night and I was scalping tickets in front of the Whiskey. It was their first tour and Marilyn Manson's first tour. And the tickets were like $20. And they're like, "Hi, Rod, dude, are you scalping our tickets?" And I'm like, "Shit, man, give a brother a break. I got to pay the rent." And they're like, "How much are you getting?" And I'm like, $250. He's like, "People are paying $250 to see us." And they hugged each other. They said, "Dude, we're going to fucking be famous." And I'm
Oh
like,
wow.
"Yeah, it looks like it. You're going to be famous tonight." And
Man.
so I did all of that. And then I found Crossfade, and I spent a couple of years developing them, and they got signed, and we sat on the shelf. That's on the shelf for a year and a half, waiting to see if Columbia was going to put the record out.
Hmm.
And we got a call one cold January day in LA, and I recognized a number on my phone. I was like, "Oh fuck, it's Columbia," and like, "Oh, they're going to drop us today." And they said, "Hey, your record's coming out the 24th of April. Congratulations." Click. And I'm like,
What?
okay, thank you. And that song Cold is still, they have 3.5 to 4 million listeners a month on combined streaming services, almost 21 years after it came out. And it was the most played song of the year in the country on 2 radio formats, active rock and alternative rock. It stayed in the charts for 65 weeks in the top 20 at Hard Rock Radio, which didn't get beaten until AWOL Nation's Sale, which was 10 years later, probably closer to 8, but it was at least 8 years. And boy, that was just a lot. That was a lot. You know, it was a whole lot going on. And there are a lot of things that I wish had turned out different, but I'm the kid that moved here and got in music business on a dare. And I found a computer engineer who wrote code and said, hey, you should write songs like Code. And he wrote an album that had 3 #1 singles, including one that stayed, you know, the stats I just gave you, because he started writing songs like Code. I said, what you want to do is you want to get out of the intro really quick, into the verse, into the chorus, have a big giant hook, and get in and out with 3 choruses inside of 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And the intro to Cold is like half a beat long. It's like, boom, like then it's right into the verse. And it's 3 or 4 choruses inside of 3 minutes.
Hit him fast.
He just wrote the songs like I said, that's what you need to do. You need to program hit songs. And here's the way to do it. And I didn't make any friends with Crossfade either, because there were a lot of people that tried to bully me because I wasn't associated with a big management company. And there were people that worked at Epic Records who would call me into New York, and I'm like, well, why am I on the Epic floor? We're on Columbia. Well, and I'll never forget this guy named Harvey Leeds, and he's very popular, but I wouldn't piss on his head if his face was on fire. And he said to me, we're going to put you on tour, and you're going to be the second out of 5 bands, and you're going to play for $5,000 a night. So that Breaking Benjamin and these other 2 bands that were managed by this radio promotions guy, Bill McGathy, in the Goot management, those 3 bands could play ahead of us and steal our thunder. And I said, well, Harvey, what do you think is best for my band? That or co-headlining with Seether, where we headline every other night and we make 20 grand a night? And he looked at me and said, so are you going to talk about what's best for your band's career? Or are you going to talk about what's best for your career? Biggest record dick move I've ever heard in my life. And I said, the fact that you would say that means I can't trust you. Thanks for wasting my airplane ticket. I'm going to go enjoy myself while I got 2 days in Manhattan. Have a nice day. And I went down to the Columbia floor and kind of told on him and said, can you believe what he just said? And Don Einer signed the band. And from what I heard, I think the screaming coming from Harvey's office was Don yelling at him about trying that shit, because he wasn't just screwing Crossfade, he would have been screwing Don, because that was Don's band. The band stayed on tour for pretty much about 20 months, 27, 28 months after the first record came out. The second record was ready, and everybody that worked on the first record was gone. The product manager was now the former assistant to the product manager. 3 of the 4 radio promotions people were gone. The one who stayed was awesome, Joe Guzik. I mean, he owns Alchemy Records now, co-owns that. He nothing bad to say about Joe. And just everybody was gone. And there was some Australian member of he was Sir Rob Stringer. And he came, you know, I flew into New York and said, I just had to buy a box of CDs and send them to radio stations. And one of them just told me that you guys called and said not to play the record. Well, we've decided to move on. I'm like, wow, you decided to move on. You sold $15 million of records on our first record, and you haven't even promoted the first single, and you decided to move on. And the reason that happened, among many, was we went to New York to get our check for 1.3 million records. It was like $9.1 million of retail.
Okay.
and it was a $15,445 check. And I laughed and said, "That's really funny. Where's the rest of the money?" And they had a bunch of accountants come in and say, "Well, here we put you on this video game soundtrack and you earned $180,000. And here you were on this compilation. So that's what you think you call music. And you earned $510,000. And you made all that money on tour." And I said, "Do you know why?" They said, "Why?" I said, "Because we were fucking supposed to. And we're supposed to be making more money off this record." And I looked right at Ed and said, "You want to spend $40,000 on a forensic accounting and settle this shit now?" And he went, "Yep." And no one ever had the courage to do that. And Ed was sitting on a pile of money, and he realized that, all these years later, Columbia has to pay him every penny they owe him on his mechanical license from all the streaming. That record earns hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Not just for the label, but for the artist payment, through publishing.
So because you guys said game on, I mean, because most people, most artists in management, they said, well, we are where we are. I guess we should just be happy. Like, you guys fought the fight.
Yeah, and I said, no, we're supposed to have earned that money. And now you're going to tell me the reason why you're fucking me on this is because you didn't fuck me on that? What's to prevent you from fucking me 16 different ways till Sunday on the next record? And Sir Rob Stringer was pretty much determined to get us out of the office because we were troublemakers. We stood up for our rights with a major label and said, no. Now the plan was, okay, put this record aside, write 5 new songs, and let's go get another record deal. But the guys in the band were just so defeated and so like, fuck this. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. Ed didn't pick up a guitar for a couple of years. He didn't write a song for years after that.
Man.
He was just like, I can make a great living programming computers and they don't fuck you. Now, he never told me those words, but that was kind of his attitude, which is, why'd I need this shit? I got marketable job skills. So when they're doing a big comeback next summer and doing a few of those big festivals, and couldn't be happier for them. They completely deserve it. I haven't been their manager since 2009. Man. So, if I want to go, I got to fly to Columbus, Ohio and buy a ticket. But, it's good for them. Good for them. And it was a terrible experience where it was just like, okay, I've been around. I've worked at labels. I know what you're doing. No. Don't say because publishing didn't fuck me, you get to fuck me on the record money. And I'm not sorry that I did. I did. I called the attorney and he's like, "Did you already say that?" And I went, "Yes." And he went, "Oh, let me see what I can do." And, he tried damage control and they were just like, fuck that guy. Fuck this band. And we ended up asking to be released from the contract. So they didn't drop us. We said, we want to get out of here. And they're like, you're the one rattling the cages asking for more money? Okay, bye.
Yeah.
And it just, things work out the way they're supposed to, I guess. But
what word of advice would you say to artists that, go through situations like that? Because like you're saying, Ed was just, he's kind of a little bit out of for a couple of years. I mean, it's tough because artistic people they're sensitive and getting rocked like that, which, come on, let's be honest. It's a corporate situation. Big dogs used to rolling over people like it's nothing. I mean, what advice would you say to artists that go through stuff like that to keep on keeping on and not get too messed up by the situation?
Well, I can't speak for Ed and I'm not going to, but what I would say if some younger manager came up and said they were in the exact position I was in, I'd say, "Oh, okay, that's great. I'll get my lawyer to call you." Instead of, "We were supposed to make that money, motherfucker. What do you mean?" And I kind of had a bit of an attitude because, we worked for 2.5 and about 4 years from the time we got signed until that day. And to have $15,445, I mean, we had a gold ringtone, for God's sakes. I mean, at $1 a piece, we sold 500,000 of those. You'd think, there's no expense in marketing a ringtone. We should be making more than that just from the fucking ringtones. And they did all the bullshitting they needed to do to cover their ass with the forensic accounting, but the record is square and it earns money every pay period. And, you know, I don't. There was a sunset clause in that management contract, but the two people who are supposed to make that money are making it. And that's my legacy to them is, you know, you're not 40% of your money is not getting diverted to people that don't deserve it.
That's right. That's right. You fought for the artist.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. That's great. Because I think there's just a lot of artists that just, you know, it's tough. I mean, it's tough living in two separate hemispheres, right? I mean, there's the hemisphere of artistic, creative performance, you know, the unknown, but it's this amazing place that being able to pull music out of thin air. And then there's this logical side it's like, you know, hard numbers and corporations. And I think for a lot of artists, it's kind of tough to navigate that.
Yeah, it's a whole new world now, man. This was in the iTunes world before Spotify. When YouTube had first started, there was no streaming. And for the record, people that bitch about streaming, I want to smack every single one of them. Because what they don't realize is that if they're bitching about streaming, no one cares about their band, really. Not enough people care for them to have been making any money to begin with. But those crossfade songs on that first record, if you add all the streaming totals up, are well over 1 billion streams. YouTube videos and everything, it's let's say 1.1 billion with all the different streaming and everything. Cold, I think, is, you know, I don't know if it's, let me look it up real quick. But the computer froze. But it's most of those spins would have been a CD that somebody bought or downloaded that, as I just told you, they would try not to pay us for. And that's something that people that are not aware of what's going on don't understand how the music business works, are all upset. And those Spotify year recaps came out last week, and I let a bunch of people have it. Like, you didn't get 1,000 streams on your song, and you're saying how Spotify's ripping you off. How many people do you think are paying $12 a month because your music is on the site? You know, Spotify pays 70% of the income pool to artists. Radio pays 7%, I believe. I don't even know what radio is.
7%.
That's why when you get a song on Top 40 radio, the ads are most expensive there. So each play on Top 40 radio is worth more than the airplay money you get for being on hard rock radio, which is often like barbershops and tanning salons and, you know, low income ads. And Cold on Spotify is just about $250 million for the one song, just under that. It'll pass $250 million next year. And, you know, so yeah, the streaming is great, and it's created a marvelous income for a whole lot of people who got their books straight, whose manager made sure that the label was actually had reported all the expenses. And there are a lot of bands out there who should be earning money every year who never took the stand and did that forensic accounting, who are not getting any money. And the labels are just like, oh, we owe you money, prove it. And they don't have the 45, I guess it's probably 60 grand now to do the forensic accounting.
But I mean, it's well worth it. I mean,
that was the best money Ed ever spent.
Yeah.
That was the best money I ever advised anyone to spend.
Because it's like you said, most of the time they just roll over on everybody. So the one that actually takes them on, they're I mean, yeah, they're still gonna do their thing and put up a struggle, but still, they're not really prepared for it in such a, because it's, what do most artists? Oh, okay, yeah, I guess, you know, we'll work it out.
You know.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. We don't want to piss the label off. We did make all that money publishing. Well, it's just like the T-shirt guy saying, well, you made a bunch of money playing the gig. Why don't you pay $30 a shirt and sell them for $30? It's like, you know, it's like, come on, man. What are you, stupid? And, you know, you know, and the second record was really good. The one that Columbia shat on was really good. And I just always will wonder what would have come out of Ed if he had been, you know, channeled that anger into writing songs instead of, you know, oh, well, had the number one song in the year in the whole country. I got nothing left to prove. Let's go back and do something else, you know, and again, I don't think I'm speaking out of line, speaking for him by saying, I mean, he loves programming computers. It's an art to it. It's an art to writing code. So and it's, you know, and I think that was fine for him at the time.
Yeah. So when it comes to the music artists that you have worked with over the years, that what are you looking for? What qualities are you looking for that make them stand out to you, that say this is an artist or band that is worthy of me getting involved and pushing it to the next level?
Well, you can add Christina Perri to the people that I discovered early. So you got Christina Perri, you got Ed Sloan, you got Scott Weiland, and you got Josh Homme. And those are the four people who I definitely can prove that I was first there for. So it's a pretty high bar for me when I'm out looking for artists. And I've got one now that I'm developing who I think is really good. He's only got one song out. It's not his best song, but the kid's called Dog Weekend.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of like David Bowie if he were Ed Sheeran and Noel Gallagher. You know, that glamour of Bowie mixed with a little bit of pop Ed Sheeran and a little bit of rock Noel Gallagher. And I'm really excited. He's got a new single coming out in January that's really good. And it's just, you know, 100,000 songs a day come out. So what do you do now? Oh. I got a meeting with one of those guys that does the promotion coming up here in a bit at the top of the hour. So, you know, finding out, you know, okay, is this the right guy to invest money in?
So what are the factors, you know, like investment and also too, like what do you look for?
Well, I will never, ever pay for an artist to go in a studio again. When I was managing Crossfade, I won't say their name. I did end up paying for half of a very expensive record, went up to their city, met with the families. Now's not the time. Let's do some family planning discussion. 4 women we wouldn't think of having a kid. Before the record was finished, all 4 of those women were pregnant. And it was, all 30 grand gone. I got $712 back on a $30,000 investment. I won't be spending any money on studios. And if musicians can't market themselves or work to make the money to market themselves at this stage, I'm not saying I won't help them, but I'm not, like I said, I was the best year of my life didn't give Katy Perry or Pharrell Williams $1,000 a week to be their manager. So I'm not gonna get into the habit, or not that I can afford to, you know, paying for everybody's business. And that's the thing, is you need to save money. It's expensive. That's why there's all these people bitching about Spotify. They put out their songs and they didn't do any marketing. So no one heard them. And they just thought, well, Spotify is supposed to make people hear my songs. No. Spotify makes them available in the internet, in the world, so people can hear them when you direct them there. And directing them there costs money, and it takes effort. And I project manage for several artist projects, and they're not artists that I manage on a commission basis. It's a consulting fee where I will help organize the different marketing aspects of what they've got going on. Somebody was trying to get one girl for $16,000 to make a video, and we got her a lyric video for $240. I got her a lyric video for $240. Her father wanted to come over from Asia to hug me, I think, you know, just because of how much of his money I saved. And the lyric video was amazing, and it was very well received. So just I'm here to make sure that people direct their talent and direct their marketing budgets as accurately as they possibly can, to make sure that they're doing everything they can to kind of get their goals met. within realistic terms. Everybody wants to be a star. Not everybody can, but who says you can't get 100,000 spins on Spotify when you have a good song if you don't market it correctly? Nothing says it. Happens all the time. A million.
And how do artists market themselves today in this modern universe of music?
You can either try to learn to do it yourself, or you can contract out to people that know that, just like you know how to write songs. Mm-hmm. And there's so many people. I'm not paying X number of dollars to do that. I'll run some Google ads. And they'll spend the same amount of money that somebody would have promised 100,000 views on Google ads, and they got 1,300, and they're like, well, the system's rigged. And they pout, they cry, and they whine, and they bitch, and they holler, and fuck Spotify, I'm going on Bandcamp. And I'm like, oh, so you don't want anyone to run across you on a playlist? Oh, goodness gracious, Einstein. That's so smart of you. No wonder you're fucking don't know what, stewing in your own juices. You don't have a business head on you.
Yeah.
And again, everything is expensive. And I have never once asked a musician to take food out of their kid's mouth or go put on the hot pants and hustle on the stroll to earn the money to pay for marketing. But I've told them the limitations of not spending money on marketing or blowing all their money on a live concert video because they want to look cool flipping their hair. And that $1,900 could have gone into marketing, and you could have gotten a $240 lyric video.
Would it be fair to say that that an artist should be spending just as much money on marketing as they do on studio and mixing?
Well, it depends on I mean, rock bands are not who I usually work with. And, hard rock, that's my background. But a lot of the stuff that I work with, I manage a couple of producers, and oh my God, it's so much easier to make money managing a producer because everybody needs production work and mixing work done, and even mastering. I mean, the mastering guy, I don't manage him, but he's somebody that I know. He's got Grammys, for God's sakes. It's $150 a song to get a master.
Yeah.
And, you need to spend the right amount of money in the right situation. It's no like X plus Y equals Z formula. You need to get in the studio with the right person and the right mindset with the right budget and come out of it. And today it's a single world. It's not an album. You don't need to do a whole album at once. You can do one song with one producer, and if you don't like them, move on.
Yeah.
That's what I tell everybody about the producers I manage. Like, we're not signing you up for 12 songs. This is the amount to do one song, and if it doesn't meet your liking, you get 2 revisions, and if it doesn't do as well as you expect, I got other clients, and I know other people that manage producers. I'll try to help you find someone. So we're in a very production oriented, indie pop, bedroom pop, loud rock and roll I'm done, man. I'm 55. I don't want to go, I don't want to go to shows where I got somebody spitting in the side of my face and I still can't hear what they're trying to say.
And for the up and coming artists trying to pick that right producer, that right manager, that right promoter, how do they know who's got it, who does not?
They email me and hire me to be the project manager, and I'll make sure they find the right people. But seriously, that's not really a joke, but seriously, they need to find what you're doing is a creative partnership. And it's like a marriage. Even if it's only for one song, that's not a marriage. That's like moving in with someone. And if you're not happy enough with a producer to want to live with them and live with their work, not in the same apartment, but have their work be a representation of your life, don't work with them. And if a manager is and don't look for managers as pocketbooks. Anybody that is throwing money at music now doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, or they wouldn't be throwing money at music.
Right.
And that's, so you got to approach it with a very different mindset than you have in even the recent past, which is, of course I won't say who, but there's an expression in the record business that no matter how good looking someone might be, meaning as an artist, there's at least one person sick of fucking. And that is so true, because
Very
I
true.
was working with this artist that is so incredible, but it got to the point where I just got sick of fucking him. So I threw him out of bed and
Yeah.
said, "Go sleep over there. I'm done. I'll
Yeah.
bring an ugly client into bed before I deal with you anymore. I'll bring a fat client into bed, a girl with hairy legs into bed, which I do not like, before I deal with you anymore. You're a beautiful, sexy, attractive woman slash client, but I am sick of fucking seeing your ass naked. Get the
Yeah.
fuck away from me."
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people don't realize is more often than not, that's what clients become. And that's why I do a lot of consulting stuff. And believe me, the commission stuff it's a lot of work and it's no guarantee. And with this one artist, I mean, he does not move as fast as I would like, but in the good sense of the term, it's not so much work I can't afford to do it when he needs the time. So it's, and again, you live in a singles world, but you got to write. If you're not prolific, if you're not in love with sitting down and writing songs, go drive a tow truck, go do something, buy a bunch of tools and make toys for kids or something that you get some pleasure out of. But
Get your mind off.
you got to write a lot. And if you're
Yeah.
not writing a lot, you're not going to be great. And if you are great and you're not writing a lot, you're not giving your management or whomever it is you work with enough ammunition to help you get as big as you should. I mean, it shouldn't be, oh, I got to sit down and write a song. Whenever I hear that, I'm out. I just hear that, I go, and I've even fired paying clients where it's
Yeah.
just like, I really don't think, you know, I think this month should be the last month. And I do not charge clients to manage them. I charge them for project management.
Right.
Anyone that ever has charged a band a monthly fee to be their manager, and they know who they are, looking at one person in particular, has never done anything but steal money from a band. Because once they get the check, there's no incentive to do anything else until next month. And they spend the whole month talking about some fake ass shit. Oh, I got this going on and this in the pipeline. Oh, it's the 15th, time to pay me. Oh, I hadn't heard from that guy yet, but don't worry, I'm following up. And then 3 or 4 months later, the band eventually says, fuck you. I wish I had my money back.
Yeah.
And I would never, ever do that. Do I do hourly consulting? Absolutely. I'm hoping you can put my email in the body of the podcast, actually, so people can email me. It's hotrod213@gmail.
Absolutely.
Sorry for the cheap plug, but I do hourly consulting. I do project management. I do, okay, you want to sit down and talk about the music business? Okay, we can sit down and talk about the music business. And I'm a cheap date. I don't drink. I much rather do it on the phone than go to some stinky restaurant and have to, like I said, have somebody spitting in my ear screaming at me because it's so loud. I would much rather do stuff in the environment that we're in now. So it's, when you cut the parking and the food and the booze off, it's really, very affordable. So it's, yeah. So that's what I'm doing. And somebody said to me, don't you wish you were back in the major leagues? And nobody would say no. I mean, nobody would say no, but I get to work every day with musicians. And I'm still that 19-year-old kid 36 years later who's glad not to be living in a redneck town in Virginia filled with people that they don't like, working for $3.35 an hour, which was a minimum wage, believe it or not, in the 80s, bagging groceries and cutting grass. So I'm happy to work with, anybody. And it doesn't have to be, like I said, it isn't just rock. I spend hours a week listening to new music and all sorts of genres that comes from curated playlist, BBC Six radio, AAA radio stations like KCRW in the United States that are tastemaker radio stations. So I can talk the talk and know what's going on musically. So I'm not just the old dude at the end of the bar talking stories about back in the day. I know what's going on and I keep up because I want to be able to look someone in the eye and say, yeah, I kind of know what I'm doing.
You got a pulse. You got your hand on the pulse.
Yeah. I kind of do. I guess that's a way to say it. So,
man, Chris, it's been an honor and a privilege. Tell everybody again the email address and also where else they can find you online.
My Instagram is hotrod213LA, and my email address is hotrod213@gmail.com. And if you have any questions about management, or if you want to talk about marketing, please reach out. If you want to interview me and there's an actual podcast or a blog or a magazine, great. But if you want to pick my brain and have me tell you funny stories about certain people, that falls under the hourly consulting rate. We can do that too. But especially if you're a new musician, or your kid is, or your spouse is, we can talk, and I can make sure you're headed in the right direction, or at least a direction where you know where you're going.
Awesome. Chris, awesome stories, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to speak with you. And Geoff, have a great night, man. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
You too, man. Let's be in touch.
Thank you.